Signs that emerge in the opposite ends of one's life. There's the folly of youth, where disobedience and division, defiance lead to lifelong consequences. And then there is the folly of old age, where dullness and decline and self-focused serving erode the goodness and possibly even the greatness of one's life. This text before us has these and some other important themes that intertwine. This is much like life. Your life is not a single note being played over and over again. It is a whole symphony of instruments. Isaac, Rebekah, Esau, and Jacob are all interacting with one another with heart issues and sinful behaviors and pulsing emotions. All the while, God is moving through them redemptive history forward. Now, I've chosen to look at a fairly large piece of text this morning that actually crosses chapter divisions. I'm allowing Moses to tell us through his own structure here what actually is holding together. He gives this text a clear structure, and then inside that structure tells the story. He tells it like a play. There are definite scenes here with the camera focused on someone and then others moving on and off the stage. So what about that structure? Well, it opens and closes with disobedience and defiance all around Esau's marriages. And then it moves to denial, where Isaac intends to bless Esau, but then discharge, where Isaac intentionally blesses Jacob. And there are designs where Rebekah plots for Jacob, but then there is danger where Esau plots against Jacob. And at the center of the story are deceits and distress, where Jacob is blessed and Esau is blessed. A carefully crafted story, a carefully laid out structure. And so the lights in the room are dimming, and the music shifts to the title theme, and the curtain begins to rise, and the story unfolds. And will you see yourself in this story? So we have marriage, the opening and the closing scenes. For the students of the Bible, note how Esau's marriages are the opening and closing scenes. It is how I selected this as a single text. It opens with disobedience, and he marries the Hittites, and Esau marrying the Hittites in chapter 26, verses 34 and 35. I'm reading from the New Living Translation this morning. At the age of 40, Esau married 2 Hittite wives, Judith, the daughter of Beri, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon. But Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. Esau is willing, in spite of the example of his grandfather Abraham, and in spite of respect for the covenant, to marry women from the land of Canaan. They pleased Esau, and they suited him. These women were evidently wicked and troublesome, and they brought great grief to Rebekah and Isaac. And then at the end of our text, there is defiance, and Esau marries an Ishmaelite, chapter 28, verses 6 to 9. Listen to what this text says, beginning in verse 6 of chapter 28. Esau knew that his father, Isaac, had blessed Jacob and sent him to Paddan Aram to find a wife, and that he had warned Jacob, "You must not marry a Canaanite woman." And he also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Padan-aram, and it was now very clear that to Esau that his father did not like the local Canaanite women. So Esau visited his uncle Ishmael's family and married one of Ishmael's daughters, in addition to the wives he already had. And his new wife's name was Mahalath, and she was the sister of Nebaioth, and the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. Esau is defiant. The text here says that Esau noticed that Isaac disapproved of Canaanite women. He sees that Jacob is sent away. We'll get to that part of the story later. And still, instead of marrying Canaanite women, he marries an Ishmaelite woman. What makes him think this is any better? Here's an act of defiance. Rather than seeking a wife among the family who might know God, he seeks a wife among the outcast family who had rejected God. These serve two important purposes besides marking the text for us. They illustrate the intentional, rebellious wickedness of Esau. Moses wants all to see that Esau is not a character to be sympathized with for losing his birthright. He is not just some jock who got taken by a sneaky schemer. He is, in fact, disobedient and defiant. And they illuminate the weak, selfish disobedience of Isaac. He is going to move into the blessing of Esau in spite of Esau's character and conduct. Isaac is going to transfer the covenant to a man who is profane, a man who has no respect nor reverence for either the covenant of God nor for the God of the covenant. That leads us then into the story itself. In scene 1, Isaac intends to bless Esau, verses 1 to 4, chapter 27. And here we learn that God's people must be alert to the dangers of spiritual drift and decline in old age. The scene opens with Isaac, old and blind, reclining in his easy chair, the dimness of his eyes betraying the darkness of his soul. The text says, one day when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son?" "Yes, father," Esau replied. "I'm an old man now," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I may die. So take your bow and a quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me, and prepare my favorite dish and bring it here for me to eat. And then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." Now we note here his physical decline, and I can do no better than Kent Hughes' eloquent description of the sad state that we find Isaac in. Dr. Hughes writes, "Now as we continue the story of his life, years have passed and Isaac is quite old, and in the intervening decades, something of Isaac's spiritual edge has dulled. Creature comforts have become center place for him, as represented in his love for food. Early on, there had been a hint of this when we read that Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game. And we get the sense that wild game and savory delights were laid out by his servants to ease his pampered stomach through the night, and he dreamed, and his table was spread again with exotic dishes, redolent with the garnishes of leeks and onions, moist and succulent. And aging has left him visually impaired and dependent upon his family and demanding. And most notably, Isaac, notwithstanding his authentic faith, had come to oppose the revealed will of God regarding Jacob and Esau. He was well aware of the battle that had taken place between the twins in Rebekah's womb. He knew that God had said, the one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Rebekah would not let him forget it. And the fact that Jacob had manipulated Esau to sell his birthright to him was a long-standing source of irritation to Isaac and a subject of contention with his strong-willed wife. He was also painfully aware that Esau had married 2 Canaanite women and that they had made life bitter for both him and Rebekah. But against the weight of all this, Isaac was determined that though Esau had lost his birthright, he would now give him the firstborn's blessing. Isaac adored his manly, hairy, red-bearded hunter son. Esau's very smell intoxicated him, and dreams of a hunter's feast filled his vacant eyes. End quote. Isaac's loss of physical sight represents for us the loss of spiritual discernment. Then his personal disobedience. This loss of spiritual discernment connected with an idolatrous love of Esau, being mastered by his appetites, allows him to plan to bless Esau. Esau has already lost the birthright through his own folly, but Isaac sends Esau out to bring home the venison he loves so much. He wants from the depths of his soul to bless Esau, and he will disobey God because his love of a son has gone idolatrous. This love for Esau is all entangled with his appetites for certain foods. Now listen to me. Now I want to say this with kindness and yet with biblical firmness. You can, and many do, love their children too much. It is possible to love your children so much that they become functional idols in your life. You will sin for the love of them. You will want to control them. You will want to be their buddy. You will want to live your life through them. Danger. Idolatry and indulgence will dull your discernment and lead you to disobey God. The curtain closes and then opens again in scene 2. Rebekah plots for Jacob in verses 5 to 17. And here we learn that God's people must act with integrity and honesty, particularly in the context of marriage. So the camera shifts to an adjoining room. There, beautiful Rebekah is listening with manipulative measures, dancing in her heart. And we find her wicked plan in verses 5 to 10. Here's what Moses wrote. But Rebekah overheard what Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for wild game, she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I have overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game, prepare me a delicious meal, then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die.' Now, my son, you listen to me. You do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies." Now make no mistake here. Rebekah is not doing this in order to help God out, or with an intent even to fulfill God's purpose. She knows what God has said. Okay, but she loves Jacob with an idolatrous love that will begin to scheme a strategy to get what she wants for Jacob. It may be rightfully his birthright, both by God's ordination and by Esau's trade. This is not the way to go about it. So here is your plan. Go get a goat and bring it to me. I know Esau's recipe. Your father is blind. He cannot see who it is who will give him the food, and he will bless you. Jacob has a hesitant response in verses 11 through 13. But look, Jacob replied to Rebekah, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me and he will see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of blessing me? But his mother replied, then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you and go and get the goats for me. Jacob is no fool. He knows that he is nothing like Esau in sound or skin or smell. Blind father has come to depend on his other senses, which will give Jacob away. He well knows the wrath and curse that will fall if he is caught out. Why would Jacob say that Isaac would think he was being mocked? Surely because Jacob has possibly even often mocked him before. But Rebekah has already anticipated the possibility. And then we find their terrible fraud in verses 14 to 17. So Jacob went out and got the young goats for her mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. And then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave him to her younger son Jacob. She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including some freshly baked bread. Rebekah prepares this terrible fraud. He brings the meat which she cooks. She gets Esau's presumably smelly clothes. She has Jacob put them on. She completes the costume by giving him a hairy feel on his exposed arms and neck. And she takes the skin and silky hair of kid goats and fastens them on Jacob, where Isaac would touch when he hugged or kissed him on the cheek. And she hands him a platter of delicious food and warm bread. The lights fade out as she pushes her ridiculously costumed favorite through the door to her husband. In scene 3, Isaac blesses his sons, verses 18 to 40. Sin and sinners do not frustrate the invincible purposes of God, and even may further them. In traveling, one of my challenges is when I come home, to the Miami Valley crud. And so please excuse me while the lights come up once again on Isaac, the grand patriarch, awaiting the arrival of a favored son with tasty venison. I can't think of this scene without thinking of these terrible scenes in the Two Towers, where Worm-tongue has the ear of the slowly failing and faltering king, the remnants of his former greatness hanging from him like useless skin. And so we have Jacob's deception, verses 18 to 29. Jacob's sin against his father is described in so painful detail. So Jacob took the food to his father. "My father," he said. "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who are you, Esau or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing." And Isaac asked, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God put it in my path," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure you really are Esau." So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. "But are you really my son, Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am." Then Esau said, "Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing." So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it, and he also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come a little closer and kiss me, my son." So Jacob went over and kissed him, and when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. And he said, the smell of my son is like the smell of the outdoors, which the Lord has blessed. And from the dew of heaven and the riches of the earth, may God always give you an abundant harvests of grain and bountiful new wine. May many nations become your servants. And may they bow down to you. May you be the master over your brother, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. All who curse you will be cursed, and all who bless you will be blessed. He lies about who he is. He enlists God as his accomplice when answering as to how he caught something so quickly. He allays the hesitations of his father. He serves him the meal and drink. How weak and pitiful Isaac is in his venal and idolatrous love. How cringing and hateful is Jacob's deceit and lies. How cunning and crafty Rebekah is, with heart beating fast, hidden behind the door. And Isaac brings him close to be sure. The kiss of betrayal, familiar in the garden with a greater Isaac later. He smells the earth and believes the man of the earth is the son he loves. And Isaac is satisfied. He imparts the blessings given here in a 4-stanza poem. And in these, Isaac blesses Jacob with the birthright and the covenant standing. In the blessing of heaven's dew, this language lyrically expresses the fullness of all of God's favor and grace as seen in the dew and the harvest. It is the blessing of wealth and prosperity. In the blessing of world rule, Isaac sees the covenant being fulfilled in the kingdom throughout all the earth. This is the blessing of power and rule. And the blessing of familial homage, Jacob is made the head of the household. He is not only established in the line, but is elevated to its headship. This is the blessing of family leadership. And the blessing and cursing, Isaac invokes the covenant of Abraham. Here he is identifying Jacob as the one through whom the covenant will be carried on with all that is entailed. This is the blessing of covenant union. The blessing completed, Isaac hurries out with the footfalls. Jacob hurries out with the footfalls of his brother just outside the tent. And we hear Esau's distress, verses 30 to 40. Esau enters from his hunt with the food prepared. And as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. And then he said, "Sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing." And Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" And Esau replied, "It's your son. It's your firstborn son, Esau." And Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "Then who just served me wild game? I have already eaten. I have blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand." Esau heard his father's words. He let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. And Isaac said, Your brother was here, and he tricked me, and he has taken away your blessing." And Isaac explained, "No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me?" And Isaac said to Esau, "I have made Jacob your master, and it declared that all his brothers will be his servants. I've guaranteed him the abundance of grain and wine. What is left for me to give you, my son?" But Esau pleaded, "But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too." And Esau broke down and wept. And finally his father Isaac said to him, "You will live away from the riches of the earth and away from the dew of heaven above. But you will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you decide to break free, you will shake his yoke from your neck." His heart is swelling as he prepares. Esau's heart is swelling as he prepares to receive the firstborn blessing from his father. He sings out his greetings, the savory aroma drifting up from his tray. And Isaac freezes. Who is this? And the deceit is uncovered. They know Isaac has been tricked, and the blessing he had to give has already and irrevocably been given to Jacob. Esau bitterly invokes Jacob's name as schemer and deceiver. But is there no blessing left for him? Jacob had stolen both the birthright and the blessing. What is for Esau this favorite son? What blessing can be given where shoulders heave in grief and tears run? Isaac invokes a blessing that is a prophecy. Here is the point of Moses giving this text. Esau's descendants, the Edomites, were to live away from the promised land, the land of dew and fatness. They would become a restless and warlike people, but they would have rights to neither the covenant, birthright, nor the blessing. This blessing actually is a curse. Now, before we rise up in sympathetic dismay with Esau's plight because of Jacob's horrid deed, remember, he is a man who has despised his birthright. He is attempting to get what he knows is not his. If Jacob is a cheat, Esau is a thief. Jacob's sin is terrible. Rebekah's planning and conniving is as well. But let's recognize, as Hebrews does, this event is the end of a long trail of bitter choices, of bad choices and bitter consequences. The final scene, Jacob flees Esau's anger. And we learn here that God uses the consequences of our sin to discipline and to correct and to change us. The final scene is taken with getting Jacob to safety. First, Rebekah warns him in verses 41 to 45. From that time on, Esau hated Jacob because their father had given Jacob the blessing. And Esau began to scheme, "I will soon be mourning my father's death. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But Rebekah heard about Esau's plans, so she sent for Jacob and told him, "Listen, Esau is coming, consoling himself by plotting to kill you. So you listen carefully, my son. Get ready and flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay there with him until your brother cools off. When he calms down and forgets what you have done to him, I will send for you to come back. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Rebekah overhears Esau's threats and realizes that he may well carry them out. He has certainly the skills to do so. So she warns Jacob and prepares him to flee to Haran, to take refuge with Laban, her brother, that is, Jacob's uncle. And Rebekah protects him, verse 46. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I am sick and tired of these local Hittite women. I'd rather die than see Jacob marry one of them. And in order to accomplish this, she goes to Isaac and pleads with him to send Jacob to Haran to find a wife. Esau's wives have been a great grief. She claims to loathe her life because of these Hittite women, but her agenda is to protect Jacob. She uses a situation and their own shared frustration over Esau's wives to manipulate Isaac into doing what she has already planned and prepared for Jacob to do. She provides cover for Jacob's flight. And so Isaac sends him. Chapter 28, verses 1 to 5. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and said, you must not marry any of these Canaanite women. Instead, go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your grandfather Bethuel, and marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. May God Almighty bless you and give you many children, and may your descendants multiply and become many nations. May God pass on to you and your descendants the blessings he promised to Abraham, and may you own this land where you are now living as a foreigner, for God gave this land to Abraham. So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to stay with his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, the son of Bethuel, the Aramean. At Rebekah's prompting, Isaac calls Jacob and sends him to Haran to live with Laban. There, he's to find a wife, for he must not marry a Canaanite woman. He must not bring upon them all the grief that Esau has. I wonder what Jacob is thinking while Isaac tells him this. One thing for certain, the natural bent of his heart towards deceit and scheming was deeply reinforced by his mother, so that it became very difficult to change as he grew older. Jacob leaves. Rebekah will summon him back when it is safe. What neither know is that he will spend 20 years away, and Rebekah will never see him again. Choices have consequences. And God works through even our sin to carry forward his plan. And he also works out the consequences of our sins in order to do his transforming work. Here are some principles that have emerged from this story. God's people must be alert to the dangers of spiritual drift and decline in old age. God's people must act with integrity and honesty, particularly in the context of marriage. Sin and sinners do not frustrate the invincible purposes of God and even further them. And God uses the consequence of our sin to discipline, to correct, and to change us. What a sad and terrible story. No one here is worthy of admiration. No heroes, villains all. But yet the determinative plan of God moves forward through the very obstacles. God advances his irreversible and his invincible purposes. What a great warning and a great hope for us. We must pursue the ends God has revealed by the means that God is pleased with. But even when we fail, he has gathered all that into our plan. Our God is in heaven, and who can stop the movement of his hand? None. Let's pray. Thank you, Father. Thank you for the grace to give us eyes to see and ears to hear and hearts that embrace these principles and truths. Here we have observed sin and deceit and indulgence and idolatrous love and conniving and scheming And we see consequences of terrible choices. We see sin unfolding. And yet, through this, Jacob the younger is blessed. And Esau the older serves the younger. All because of the outfolding of your plan. Father, I pray you would help us, grant us grace. And in these dark hours and difficult times in which we now live, may our hearts be fully trusting, fully resting, and fully pleasing to you. As he sings, for the love of God, for the greatness and glory of your Son. Amen.